Hey everybody, this is Steve from Bavaro Custom Woodwork. Today I'm going to show you a DIY router sled that I built. You can use this sled for any type of project for leveling slabs, leveling finished projects, leveling end grain products, whatever you want. This thing's been very useful for me, so I thought I'd share it with everybody to show them how I built it, what I used to build it, actually show it to you in action as well, and also give you some suggestions on some improvements that I would make if I were to do it all over again. Perhaps you're asking why a router sled. This is a great tool for my shop. I have a limited footprint in my shop, so I have to be conscious about what I'm doing and how big pieces are taking. I don't have enough space for a dedicated CNC machine or a large industrial scale planer. So this makes perfect sense for me. I can assemble it and disassemble it whenever I need to, and we're ready to go. There's a couple other reasons that come into play. Cost, size and flexibility, and safety is probably the big one. Cost for this router sled that I built, it cost me about $150 to build. That's buying pieces off of Amazon and leveraging a couple of scrap pieces that I had around the house. I've seen these router sleds going for upwards of $550 for a comparable cutting capacity. You can get larger or smaller, whatever you need to fit your needs. And that's the nice thing about these router sleds, the DIY ones. You can buy additional linear rails for a relatively low cost, and you're going to be able to adjust it to be larger or smaller in size to fit your needs. That's the flexibility and the cost. From a safety perspective, I do a lot of end grain cutting, leveling projects, whether they're cookies or end grain cutting boards, butcher block, whatever it is. Planers and end grain typically do not get along. I know there are people who have used this successfully, and I've also heard a lot of horror stories about machines and the project going flying. So I highly recommend against using a planer for an end grain material. If you do it at your own risk, and if you have success with it, good for you. But I would recommend against it. The router sled is fantastic for end grain. A drum sander would also be a phenomenal choice for this, but depending on how much material you're trying to remove, a drum sander is going to be very slow. A router sled, you can remove a good amount of material in a short period of time and get a very good out result that you can then feed through your drum sander, or you can just use a regular orbital or belt sander to level it out the rest of the way. The router sled's not going to be your end-all be-all. You will still need to sand, you'll still need to prep and everything, but it's a great starting point to get you down to the level that you need. We're going to go into some of the pieces that I've used, the unassembled view of this. I'll walk you through how things go together. It's very quick and easy. I can assemble this thing in 5 minutes, have it disassembled in 5 minutes, and I can store it away. Again, it's a small footprint, especially when it's disassembled, so I can just stick it in a corner and use it whenever I need it. So next we'll have a look at the pieces that I used to build the router sled and the unassembled view of them. Okay, here are the components that I've used to build my router sled. You can see I have a couple different linear rails, 4 different ones. I built some little bridges or clamps, some end stops, some plexiglass with a dust port. So look at these from left to right. These longer pieces, these are my base rails. These are linear rails. They're 1800 millimeters, which equates to about 71 inches. These are going to be my rails that go on the bottom. They'll attach directly to the bench, and they'll allow for left to right movement. Next, I have my next linear rails. These are going to be my cross ones that allow for forward and backwards movement. These are 1200 millimeters, which equates to about 47 inches. These rails already have the slides attached to them, which allows for movement very easily. I also have the slides attached to the ends here. These are the slides that actually go directly on to the base rail once I assemble it. You can see I have these little wooden bridges here. I just built these out of some leftover cherry that I had, and they attach directly on there. When I first started on this project, I wasn't sure how the top rail was going to attach to the base rail. It's kind of flying by the seat of my pants. When they came in, I realized I needed something to attach them, and that's where, again, I just built these little bridges. If you do build the bridges, make sure you build extras, because some will break, some will not line up properly, so it's easier to have extras and just customize them as you need and then move on to the next one. These little rail stops, these go onto the end of the base rail, and this is to prevent your forward and backwards rail from sliding off as you're moving further to the right or to the left. If you get too close to the end, this will keep the rail from falling off. The router is a very high speed tool. You don't want it falling off and risk injuring yourself. I have a base plate that my router attaches to. It's just a 3/8 inch plexiglass. I used a 12 by 12 on this one. I drilled a whole bunch of holes so I can orient the plate any orientation that I need it. I can orient the router whatever way I need it. I also drilled a second hole in here for my dust collection. This machine is going to make a lot of dust. It's going to be covered or cover everything. It's going to be all over the place. Even with the dust collection, you're still going to have a lot of dust. So keep that in mind. Wear protection, mask, respirator, eye protection, whatever you need. With the hole for your router bit, make sure that you drill that big enough to make for whatever router bit you're going to use. As I'm leveling these slabs, I should say, I have this massive 3-inch carbide bit router bit. It's a 1/2 inch shank, has carbide tips on the end, so whenever they get dull or damaged, I can just rotate them or replace them. As long as the router bit itself is not damaged, I can just replace these shanks or the tips very easily, and it's very cost effective. So once I put this together, I typically will use a piece of melamine as the base. It's flat, it's rigid, and I attach that directly to my workbench. The 1800 millimeter rails will attach directly onto here. The plexiglass or the router base will attach to the base of the rails that go forward and backwards, and then the router attaches directly onto the base itself. I take the base plate off of my router and attach it directly here to optimize space. Once this assembly is put together, I'll take the rails here and just simply slide them onto the base rails, and that's the assembly method. It's very simple, straightforward. As I mentioned, it's 5 minutes at most, maybe 10, but it's easy to do. As you're doing this, just make sure that your base rails are parallel. You want them to be equidistant apart on the right and the left side. Otherwise, you're going to get a pinch as you try to move the sled to the right and the left, and it's going to become a problem for you. So next, I'm going to go ahead and put this together, and I'll show you what it looks like as I'm actually using the sled. I'm going to go ahead and level out a cookie just to show you what it looks like. I also have an epoxy project. It had cookies in epoxy. I'll put that at the end of the video so you can see what that looks like as well. If you're using epoxy, you might want to wear gloves because that epoxy goes flying all over the place and it hurts when it hits you. It feels like you're getting sandblasted. All right, here's the cookie all leveled out, removed from the plate. It's nice and smooth. You can see there are some router lines in it that will need to be addressed, but that's relatively easy to do with sander or a drum sander now. A couple things I forgot to mention. As you're starting to level this out, make sure that you use something to secure your piece of work so it doesn't move around, especially on the melamine. Since it is smooth, it does have a tendency to slide. If you have a T-track system, great, you can just use something like that. If not, you might have seen in the video that I just used some blocks on there, attach them directly to the bench to hold it in place to keep it from moving around. The cutting capacity of the sled that I have built is approximately 62 inches by 34 inches. I could make that a little bit bigger cutting capacity by using a smaller base plate. That's what's the limiting factor. It's hitting up against the rails on either end. The overall footprint is about 72 inches by about 48 inches. And again, I can adjust those. I can buy additional linear rails to make it bigger or smaller if I wanted to. So those are a couple of pieces that, just a couple of other tips that I want to throw out there. The last piece, whatever you're using to hold your piece in place, just make sure that it's lower than the piece itself, because what you don't want to have happen is it to be higher. Your router bit's going to hit it. It's going to damage your router bit, potentially cause a dangerous situation where metal might be going flying or whatever. You want to avoid things like that. A couple of the improvements that I would make if I were to do this again. The first one is likely around my base plate. I'll move this so you can hopefully see it a little bit better. Again, since it's wide, it's 12 inches by 12 inches, I'm hitting up against the rails. I would probably use a smaller base plate, a narrower one, so I could get a couple more inches of depth cutting as I'm going forward and or backwards. And I'd also adjust the dust port to be pointed to the side. My dust collection system is over to the right, so it makes sense to have the port pointing to the right as opposed to pointing towards the back. The final thing that I would change is also with the dust collection. Right now, when I was doing this piece, I had the hose running along the ground, and the ridges would get caught on the edge of my bench, causing it to the sled to not slide as easily. I'd have to constantly lift that up to make it so I could get that smooth movement. I'll probably put an overhead dust collection system in where the pipe will drop down directly above the workspace, and then I can avoid that piece. But those are small things that I can change relatively easily. I'm not too concerned about those pieces, but they will definitely improve the performance of the overall project. Finally, the last couple things I'd like to say is just a few extra tips. As you're working with the router sled, let the tool do the work. That's why you have it. That's what you're using the machine for. It's supposed to be making your life a lot easier. If there's a challenge, if you're running into something that's not moving smoothly or you seem like you're getting stuck, turn the tool off, check it out, fix the issue, and go back forward. You want to make sure you're being safe. The next tip is make shallow passes. You don't want to overpower the tool. You don't want to bear it down, especially if you're going through something like epoxy, which is extremely hard, or an extremely dense wood. Make it or take shallow passes. Typically, when I'm going through epoxy, I will maybe make a 1/16 of an inch pass at most. As I start getting into more of the wood surfaces, I can go a little bit more aggressive, but you still don't want to go too crazy with it. Finally, be safe. Wear face shield. Like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of dust flying around here. Wear a respirator. You don't want all that junk getting in your lungs. It's going to get all over the place to start with. If you can keep it out of your body, it's probably better. Wear a mask, wear safety glasses at a bare minimum, because there is a lot of material that does go flying and it will hit you in the face, will hit you everywhere. My entire shop is covered from the small pieces that I did with both the cookie and the epoxy project that I'm working on. It makes a lot of dust even with the dust collection, so just stay safe. As I mentioned before, if you are using epoxy, wear long sleeves, if you're working with epoxy, wear long sleeves. Wear gloves. I know gloves are usually not recommended with a rotary tool, because if they get caught in there, you're going to end up risking losing your fingers. But it is quite painful as you're getting pelted with the epoxy chips. It basically feels like you're getting sandblasted. So it's not the most pleasant thing. If you don't want to wear the gloves, that's fine. You don't have to. You can bear through it. It's not the most painful thing in the world, but it's not pleasant. I appreciate everybody watching. If you have any comments, questions, please let me know. If you have any tips for me that might make my router sled more useful or beneficial, share them with us as well, because we're just all looking to learn here. I'm just sharing my knowledge with what I've done with you, and I would love for you to share with me. Well, thank you very much. If you like this, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. I will be putting additional videos out in the near future. Thank you very much. Take care.